And now, everyone, please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to your host, Rick Ramsey.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Want to welcome you guys. You're here. You are Watchmen fans, right? Yeah. And we are here with the illustrious Vice President of Production Services, Stephen Beres. Let's give it up for him. And Steven's going to kick our session off today with a little video, right?
Yeah, I brought a video. So for anybody who hasn't seen Watchmen, maybe close your eyes, I guess. I don't know. All right, let's roll it. You guys ready?
I'm on the verge of completing my life's work.
So then tell me what your clock does.
No.
Enjoy your cake.
You're wrong about Cyclops. We're about restoring balance, and our country forgets the principles. And it is difficult to be a white man in America. So I'm thinking I might try being a blue one.
In less than an hour, they're going to capture Dr. Manhattan, and they're going to destroy him. And then they're going to become him.
John, I woke you up because the cavalry knows who you are. They want to kill you. Let's stop them.
You can't stop them because it's already happening.
We win.
I'm sorry.
John!
Yeah. All right. Now we're going to spend, I hope you're ready, because we're going to spend a lot of time bombarding you with a lot of questions about...
I'm here. I'm happy to answer.
About Watchmen. I want to kick off the first question. What is up with the eggs?
Oh, yeah, the eggs. Here, listen, I won't talk about any story points that weren't sort of mentioned in the show. That's the domain of Damon and all the excellent work they've done there. But yeah, I think just to touch on that. The fear that everyone had going into this show was, what do you do with a property like The Watchmen? And Damon has said this on a number of occasions, that it is a terrifying property to go anywhere near, because the book, the source material, is so incredibly dense and so incredibly specific, and doesn't necessarily convert out of the comic book medium super easily. I think you give a little bit more creative license to a comic book than you do to this sort of realistic nature of a television show. So he had to think about a way of embedding all of these very strange, specifically comic book things into this world of television. And I think that a lot of that ended up being these sort of reoccurring themes, where, obviously the underlying story of, sort of race and the tension there that really speaks to, a lot of what's going on in our country now. I think the reoccurring themes like the eggs and things like that, these sort of things that thread themselves through the whole series of episodes, is that sort of way to sort of pay homage to the comic book material without sort of compromising what is, otherwise also needs to be an approachable television show. Yeah. That somebody who maybe didn't read, the graphic novel from back to front 5 times, something still enjoyable and approachable and meaningful for someone like that.
Cool. Well, we're going to open it up for questions. We're going to start over on this side. Who's got our first question? There we go.
Hello, my name's John. I'm in the film degree program right now. So I know with making adaptations specifically for comic books, getting the original creators' support behind making an adaptation is kind of important for that. But I know Alan Moore particularly is really kind of prickly about kind of making adaptations of his own work. And so I was kind of curious how that affected the production of the show and kind of the creative choices that went into making it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's obviously very sort of well known that Alan Moore didn't want to have anything to do with the television adaptation. That's to say that he did not necessarily stand in the way of it or support it or really feel anything specifically about it, just that he didn't want to participate. And so I think that, again, that's where, Damon took the source material, and I think it was a challenge for everybody involved, but and really spoke to that. So Game of Thrones, a little different because George is so heavily involved, was through the entire show. David and Dan being able to sort of move in creatively different ways inside of what is words on the page in the book, it was a little different because they had George there as a partner in that. I think that what is smart about what Damon did with Watchmen was that it isn't the words on the page. It is characters in the universe, but it isn't even in the same time period. And so I think because of that, it gave him the freedom to make something that is part of the franchise, but not part of the original work, which I think is where, was the huge challenge for the Zack Snyder film, which, again, these are all different things. The graphic novel, the film, the series are all different things. They happen to be in the world of the Watchmen, original graphic novel, but they don't exist in the same world, meaning that they're not dependent on each other in any way. And I think that's the way that sort of Damon was able to realize this thing that, and I'm sure you all know, is incredibly important to him. Is sort of a foundational piece of literature in his work and in his life, that he was able to work in that world with those characters, but not in a way that would compromise the original material. And I think they did that expertly well. I think it speaks to the sort of source in a really great way without in any way compromising it. So if you haven't read the graphic novel, you're in no way at a disadvantage watching the show. Of course, if you had, you're at an insider's level of enjoyment. And I think that a lot of people who watched and enjoyed the series who hadn't read the graphic novel have now subsequently gone back and read it, and I'm sure enjoyed it reverse, right? Where for those of us who grew up with the graphic novel, seeing the show realized in such a cool way was really satisfying. And I think that the opposite is true as well. For those who really loved the show, they went back and read the graphic novel, got all of that extra background, and again, were very satisfied with the graphic novel. So I think they're very complementary. They're very complementary works in that way.
All right, let's go right here.
As an aspiring producer, when picking up a project like this, what kind of considerations do you have to give to, say, a production company like Warner Brothers who did this before, or Zack Snyder, and how they feel? Like, what's the avenue to address that when you guys are looking to a project like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it is a Warner Brothers property. We are a sister company with Warner Brothers. Warner Media owns both Warner Brothers and HBO. And so in the case of Westworld, Watchmen, and a few other properties, we work in a very tight synergy. And so they are the license holder, for Watchmen. And so that's how that relationship came together. That's how we were allowed to do it. That's the same deal we have for Westworld. I don't honestly know at all what Zach's opinion of the series is. He's an enormous fan of comic book material and stuff in general, so I would suppose that he enjoyed it. I have no idea, though. I can't really obviously speak for him, but in any experience that I've had or stories I've heard about him, he's a big fan of this kind of stuff. So it would make sense that he would enjoy it. But yeah, again, I think it sort of goes back to that idea that they're sort of different properties, and they kind of exist, I think, in complement to each other, but can exist without, as well. Just like you could have watched the Watchmen movie and not read the comic book, and it would have been fine. And I think vice versa is the same. So whether you like the movie or not.
One more follow-up question to that. With companies such as Quibi coming out and things like that, where's HBO stance when they're developing new material to kind of address that the way they think consumers are going to change watching.
Yeah, I mean, we're
shows.
coming out with a new platform shortly, the HBO Max platform, which was announced earlier later last year rather, and so I don't know. We're certainly not programming any differently for HBO specifically. Now, of course, we're part of a much bigger set of content creating companies that ultimately contribute to the new platform, but we're not making any decisions that are outside of our normal, looking for great new original voices and giving them a platform to be able to exhibit that. So far as Quibi and stuff, the short format stuff, I mean, it is interesting because, as we launched our original digital platform, we did notice that people watched a lot more of the behind the scenes material and stuff that I think HBO and our creative services team in New York does such an amazing job on that stuff. They do really in-depth and really textured looks inside of, something as simple as the hair, makeup, and costumes on a show like Game of Thrones could easily be a 5-hour-long documentary, just given how much depth there is there. Watchmen is very much the same, right? How much specificity is given to each individual craft, and the fact that HBO does these short format, interstitial documentary content around things like that, I think is great. And the digital platform is a big source of viewership for that. I think because you're on a train and you've got 15 minutes, you don't want to start an episode of The Watchmen. You want to wait until you're at home, and it doesn't matter what device you're consuming it on, but you don't sort of want to watch it on a train where it's loud or whatever. But you will, because you are ravenous to consume that content, you will start sort of consuming that sphere of content that sits around it. Those interstitial pieces, those inside looks, those chats with Damon, those chats with the actors and things. So.
I think we're going to take another question in a minute here, but we have a couple. All right, great. Let me do a follow-up or a question that kind of relates to that. With films, a film can be made, and if the trailer's good enough, you can usually sell an audience to get your money back. And so a lot of times, once the film is out, then the critics go and say whatever they have to say about it, and that could change the next weekend's ticket sales, right? Because you all read that stuff, right? With episodic formats, it's a little, you almost have to pay more attention to what the audience is going to respond to, because that's a continuous thing. If you fail first episode, you might fail the rest of the time. So how hard is it to, following up, how hard is it to, or how much research maybe is done to make sure that the audience that you're trying to grab, those fans who are already reading the book, may have watched the film, are going to be satisfied with what you're putting out there?
Well, I think that's largely the content of the show is largely up to the showrunner, the creator of the show, the writing team, those folks putting it together. I think our job as a platform, as a studio, is to make sure that we are marketing that content, because the content, we like to think it is what it is. It's a work of art. It's a piece that we hang in our, Richard Plepler, our former CEO, used to love to say that HBO is a gallery. And it's full of paintings from different artists. And we have some influence in those paintings, certainly, but we are not the artists. The artists are creating this work. But our gallery is responsible for cultivating the audience that will come and look at these works. And so how we market the service, how we market the content, how we organize the gallery, how it's laid out, what things are sitting next to other things, all of that is incredibly important to us. So as curators of this, it's our direct responsibility. Leslie's trying to get a hold of me. He doesn't know I'm on a panel. Our direct responsibility as curators is to make sure that the right audience finds the content. So an audience that's going to love The Watchmen absolutely needs to know that we're making a Watchmen television show, and it's going to be amazing, and you absolutely have to tune in, and here's everything about it, and here's inside information about it, and here's all of that. But then it's also up to us to present to an audience who has never heard of The Watchmen what is this and why is it something you would be interested in? What is this and why is it something that might speak to an audience that otherwise would say, oh, another comic book thing, I'm so tired of that, which is hilarious because like 10 years ago, the idea of a comic book thing being good or being something that there was too much of is sort of hilarious, right? But now, of course, we live in a world where most comic book movies are very good, extremely well made, do an incredible, amazing amount of box office. So now it's interesting because we're trying to find a way to kind of innovate in that space, right? I think everybody is looking at, well, we know comic books are great source material, but how do we sort of put a different filter in front of that so that you're not just getting what the MCU is doing, and they're doing amazing work, but you're getting, HBO's interpretation of what a comic book project is. And I think Watchmen speaks to that perfectly, right? Just like Game of Thrones spoke to what HBO fantasy product looks like. And so I think because of those things, it's very much up to us as curators to say, okay, audience that already loves this, here's things to love it even more, to anticipate it even more, to go one level deeper. And audiences that maybe have never heard of it or don't know anything about Alan Moore or Damon Lindelof or anyone involved in it, here are some things that you may be interested in because this is a property that can also speak to you. You don't have to be a fan of the existing material.
All right, so question, where's the mic? There we go.
Hi, so I was wondering, how do you pick the music, or like who's in charge of that? And do you guys have like any like internship programs or any way to like shadow for that? Or?
Yeah, in the case of the shows, all of the music is a function of a couple of different individuals. So in the case of the Watchmen, basically all of the music is sourced from Trent Reznor. So either original compositions by Trent and his team, or music that he has sourced specifically for it. We have a music clearances team at HBO that deals with making sure that we have the legal rights and all the contractual obligations. We have a sort of general music supervision with Ambient Clean that makes sure that if we are looking for specific tracks or we need to negotiate with an artist on behalf of the show to procure that. But the music supervisors on the shows are the ones who do that work. And many cases, those people are folks who obviously have an incredibly eclectic taste in music. In the case of Trent Reznor, they may be an artist themselves, so they may be able to do composition and things themselves. And Trent works with a number of people to do the more business-oriented contractual work and things like that. But you may have someone like that who is a sort of artist slash composer slash music supervisor, and you may have a traditional music supervisor who's going to commission score to be written, who's going to find tracks from artists to be able to place. So it's a broad array, but those people all work for the shows. So far as internships, it's not that formal of a situation. In their case, they are freelance, work for hire individuals, and so they likely have some company set up, but it's probably very small and for the use of loaning out for the use on shows. But they certainly have people that work with them. And I always say if it's something that you're interested in, the role is music supervisor if you look at it on IMDb. And so find shows that you love. Let's say it's Watchmen. There will be several levels deeper than Trent Reznor. Obviously, probably not going to be able to email Trent. But in the case of another show, let's say it's any generic television show, but you really love the soundtrack for it. You really like the music in it. You feel like it speaks to the kind of stuff that you like. And I would say research that music supervisor, find other things they've worked on, see if you like that stuff as well, and then reach out to them. Because in many cases, someone like a music supervisor doesn't exactly, and I say this a lot, but doesn't have a huge fan base. There aren't music supervisor fan clubs. It's like that's not something that people even usually can name one. Directors of photography, maybe there's 5 you can name. Directors, maybe there's 5 to 10, 15 maybe. Actors certainly. But once you get to a certain level on a show, they may play just as important of a role as anyone else. An editor, or a production designer or someone like that plays an incredibly important role on the film, but may not necessarily have the same name recognition, and therefore they're going to be a lot more approachable. But I always say, like, don't ever send someone an email. And for those of you who were here with Demo and Leslie and I yesterday, don't just send somebody an email or go up to somebody and say, like, hey, man, I'm a big fan of Game of Thrones. I always say, like, that's wonderful. I am too. I think it's fantastic. But then you've wasted an opportunity to make a real connection with that person. Don't just send Leslie an email and be like, what's it like to work with Rihanna? He will probably not send you an email back, but if you ask him in person, he'll say, it's great. Moving on. And it's an opportunity wasted, right? So figure out what it is. I mean, in the case of the context of Watchmen, is it the Trent Reznor music, that incredible synth vibe? Is it that's what you're really vibing on? And you feel like, man, does that ever reinforce the emotion of, the first time, that someone gets dressed as character and they get, this incredible synth track under them. And I just felt like, man, it really just drove it home that this is serious business and this is a major change for this character, that, what we've seen her up to this point has been completely different. This is the real person. And that music really sold that for me. If you can articulate what that person actually does in a way that relates to you being a fan of them and not just of the work in general, that will immediately put you on a different level than the folks that come up to them all the time and just say, hey, I'm a really big fan and I appreciate what you do. And that's wonderful to hear. But if you want to put yourself on a path to working in a capacity that person works, then let them know that you understand the work and take that apart and show them the pieces, that you've recognized that they've put together to make that project what it is, and they will really appreciate that. But music supervisors, start researching the ones that you like.
All right. Do you have anyone on this side? No, I'll come back. There's one. You want to get that one? All right. Then we'll come back over here.
So, as far as I know, Watchmen was one of the first, or if not the first, comic book, property to come to HBO. Was there ever a time that you guys were like, this isn't going to work going to this platform because it's trying something new? Maybe people won't be into comic books. They come here for Game of Thrones or other stuff like that. So maybe following up with that was maybe hard just because bringing people into this.
I think following up on Game of Thrones is hard no matter what it is. I think following up with Game of Thrones with more Game of Thrones was hard. And I think that never changes. And I think if it isn't hard and we don't question if it's going to resonate with an audience, but we feel like it is. And again, our creative development team, Casey Blois and his team are absolutely unparalleled in the industry with the work that they do. They understand the voice that HBO speaks with better than anyone else. They understand the work that we are doing, the mission that we have set out to, this idea of presenting new and original voice and bringing these human stories, these interpersonal relationship stories to people, again, cast in many different genres, I think that a lot of people said, oh, a fantasy show on HBO, what is that going to be like? Just like people have said, well, a comic book show on HBO, I don't know, is that going to work? And, I don't know, right? The development executives feel like it's going to. And, when it comes to us and it's time to make it, sure, I think you go into it questioning, every time, like, oh man, is this going to be a good one? I hope it is. And, because we work with, without question, the most talented writers, the best directors, the best DPs, the best editors, we are obviously sort of predisposed to make great stuff. It doesn't mean that we're going to automatically. It means a lot of people need to work very hard, and there needs to be a lot of trust between the development executives at the beginning and the creative talent, and then that has to transform into a trust between the studio and the production, and then ultimately that has to roll into trust between the viewers, between our subscribers, and the service, and that you trust that HBO is the place for for the kind of stuff that you like. And it might be Euphoria today, and it may be The Watchmen tomorrow, and eventually it will be something we've not even thought of yet, but you know that there's a consistency, there's a brand quality, there's an aesthetic there that you really love, and it's up to us to continue to maintain all the things that make that. It starts with amazing stories, and it continues with incredible production value and incredible marketing, and then finally a satisfying delivery system that allows you to get it when you want it, where you want it, and I think that we try every day. We don't always succeed, but we certainly try every day to kind of hit very high on all those metrics.
All right, let's move over to this side. Question here.
Can you hear me? All right.
Yeah.
So this year or last year, you guys did two of my favorite properties, period. My favorite book series, His Dark Materials and Watchmen. And both have very challenging topics with them. You have religious fallacies and freedom of thought with His Dark Materials, and then you had racial politics in Watchmen. Was there pushback, and what was that like, really bringing these to life, the challenges of, I don't know if it's producers. I know the Catholic Church pushed back on the film pretty heavily with His Dark Materials.
Yeah, I think that we don't seek out material that is challenging, but we're certainly not afraid of it. I think that HBO has always been a place where we are going to be challenging with our content. We are going to bring documentaries, bring obviously narrative stuff to our service that is not something you would ever see on network television, and not just because people always say, well, it's coarse language and nudity, but it isn't. I think that it can be the most G-rated from a visual and language standpoint, but if it has a deeply important message, a message that has a lot of controversy behind it, that can be equally as unsettling to a given group, right? And I think that is the sort of power, that's the engine that drives HBO, is this not just willingness, but this sort of desire to put things on the service, hopefully something that you've never seen before, something that is truly challenging, and not just because it's visually or auditorily something that you couldn't put onto a normal service, but that it is in fact something that is challenging at a deeper level. And so I won't speak to the sort of politics and things around those properties, but I will say that we're incredibly proud of both of those series, not just because I think they are some of the best looking, best sounding, best visual effects, best shots, but however you want to measure it in that regard, of any series like them on TV now, but that they both deal with very challenging concepts in a in a very interesting way, in a way that hopefully will bring people who, if it was simply as sort of as simply as binary as it is this printed right up front and this is what this thing is really about, that maybe people wouldn't watch it. Instead, we hope that people are sort of they are lured in by the interest of the characters and the universe and the fantasy, the genre, but then hopefully really get something out of the deeper substance. And I think that's a differentiator for HBO, right? Is that that there's always going to be some substance there. There's always going to be that one level deeper that you don't necessarily get everywhere. And it's great to live in a world where there are more and more services being more willing to do that. I think that years ago, you wouldn't have been able to make a series like His Dark Materials in the way that this series is as true to the source material. The film obviously was not the same. It was a different time, and it was a different kind of material. I think trying to capitalize more on the sort of Harry Potter sort of notion, but the series is very true to the source material, and I think is also fantastic. So thoroughly entertaining. That's a co-production, but a thoroughly entertaining and really, really well done.
Keep up the good work. You guys are doing an excellent job.
Well, thank you very much. I am an extraordinarily small grain of sand in the beach that is everyone that works incredibly hard at HBO. But I will bring your enjoyment to them. I'll let them know.
Yeah, and if you guys also, need someone to loiter around season 3 set, keep
I'll let
us
you
in
know.
mind.
Copy that. I'll let you know.
All right. Does anyone over here have a question? Oh, we're going to go
No,
online.
online.
Yeah, we do have an online student with a question. And that student wanted to know, is networking as important as those hands-on skills? And if so, what is the best way to network?
I think networking is a hands-on skill. How about that? But no, I think. Listen, networking, and it's funny. We just had an entire panel about it yesterday. I would suggest that you go to YouTube and review that panel because there's an hour's worth of content specifically on that subject. But I will say, to distill that down into a quick answer, that networking is that soft skill that will allow you to apply the rest of your sort of applied skills, right? It is that soft skill that when you get truly good at networking, which, some people will say, well, I hate that word. And it's because there's a stigma of it. It's sort of like a business card collecting contest that no one ever wins. Because it's not putting the focus on what you really need to do, which is to form a meaningful relationship with someone that maybe you can help or can help you. And if you do that enough times, and you're out there in a way that people know not just what you do because you quickly introduce yourself and hand them a business card, but because you made a connection with them, because you had a real human interaction with them, because they remember that, oh yeah, they met you somewhere and you imparted something to them, or again, you were a big fan of the work that they do when not a lot of people are, and you have a sort of simpatico relationship. You can put yourself in a place where they remember themselves being you and coming up to that person in their life and having that conversation. If you leave a networking event or any situation in which you are networking and you have that one connection, that one real connection, that's better than 100 business cards. Because everybody takes his business cards home, they throw them out. I don't have a business card. Demo doesn't have a business card. Leslie doesn't have a business card. And that's because, if we're going to have a conversation with someone, it's a little bit up to them to follow up with us, to keep checking in, to keep let us know what's going on, because we're in that place where, we are, I'm not looking for a job, I'm good. But I'm more than happy to find people who are really good at things and that I may be able to use in the future. Because as a producer, my job is to collect, and I said this yesterday, a collection of people who know how to do strange and amazing things that I may one day need to employ on one of our shows, or who knows, right? And so if you can embed yourself into people's brains in a way that, like, man, I was just so blown away by this gentleman's enthusiasm on the soundtrack for the thing that I just worked on, and man, it really felt like he was sort of on the same wavelength as I was, and why I emotionally chose these songs to kind of move that scene in the right direction and kind of, just kick people in the gut that extra time, make them feel even worse about what was happening to this character. Like, he really got me, and that's really cool, and you'll remember that. And if you don't talk to anybody else that whole night, that's a huge win. Because that person will remember, and then you follow up with them later on, and you say, hey, I really enjoyed our conversation. Here's what I'm working on, and also. Final thought on the networking thing, which not enough people do, is network when you're doing well. Network when you're busy. Send people emails checking in with them. Not humble bragging, but send people emails and say, hey, I'm on a show for the next 2 months, but I just wanted to check in with you, and see how you're doing, and and let you know that in June I'm going to be around. Maybe I can buy you a coffee or something, because I definitely want to continue our conversation. Don't always be like, hey, I'm looking for something, so if you hear of anything, just let me know. Let people know what you're doing all the time, like you would, a friend or neighbor. Update them in a way. Again, don't be creepy, don't be weird, but keep people, in the loop, and don't always expect something back from that. Don't necessarily be like, well, I sent you an email and you never emailed me back, so I just stopped emailing you. Well, people are busy. They can't always email you back. And maybe if it isn't relevant at that moment, it gets flagged and they're going to follow it up, and then their email automatically deletes after 30 days and they've forgotten about it. But so follow up with them in another 30 days, another 60 days. Let them know what's going on. Let them know that you noticed something. Audio guys, there's new plugins every 15 minutes, it seems. If you play around with something and you don't think maybe Leslie hasn't seen it, send them an email and say like, hey, Leslie, I know the kind of stuff that you do. This kind of a plugin seems like it'd be something that you'd be into. I don't know if you've seen it, and if you have, like, what are your thoughts? Do you think it's cool? And that's something that like he can kind of bite into a little bit, or not. And if he doesn't get back to you, cool, no problem. But that's something that people can engage on, because Leslie loves plugins. This is like his favorite thing in the world, And so like if you can engage with somebody on that level, people know that I'm a big Land Rover fan, and so they'll see some Land Rover something somewhere and send me a note, and like friends, people I've worked with, showrunners, whatever, like, oh, hey, there's this thing in Land Rover. Have you seen this? Like, yeah, I was there. I was, a thing. Like, it's pretty cool, right? And it's just like it's an opportunity to just engage on something that doesn't feel like it's a pressure situation where I have to feel uncomfortable because I don't immediately have a thing that I can give you. So that way, it's just like, no, pressure's off. It's just let it be known that you're there and that you're ready to do something.
Before we go to the next question, if I could throw in 2 cents on that. Everyone, especially when you're at this level in college and you're looking, when you get out to start, we look at networking as the foot in the door. Networking is a life skill. It's not just your foot in the door. Your entire career will be based on the connections that you make, not just the beginning of it, but the middle of it, the end of it will all be that. And I challenge you to, sit down and imagine where do you want to be in 10 years and look at somebody's name that is there and all the people that are connected in that path. And you'll find that skill is what took them there. And it makes you better at your craft. It makes you better at your technical, because as Stephen said, you learn from other people. And that learning is something that a lot of people respect, the fact that you're willing to learn, and then the fact that you have knowledge that you're willing to share. And so it's always a life skill. It's a continuous thing. And my last thought on that is it just makes you happy, to know that there's people around you that love what you love and are excited about it, just like you're excited about it. And that's why we're all here, right? So those things it's more than business cards. It's more than those things. It's very much finding the people that you connect with and feel like you can invest in and who want to invest in you, right? All right, next question. Where are we going? Right here? There we go.
So, I
cool
think
shirt, by the way.
Thank you. I think easily one of the best things about the Watchmen show was that it never really once stopped down to explain what's going on. It trusted its audience. And so I was wondering, with those more absurd things that kind of happen in the show continuously, when do you know to trust your audience, and when, like Amber's name, but the senator character, when he kind of slowed down and explained his plan, when do you know when to trust them and when to just let them know?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That sort of speaks to Damon's process in the script. There are notes about squid raining from the sky, and literally a side note of like, don't worry about it. It just happens. Move on. And that's the way that he writes. And he has that sense of like, this is meant to be, I don't know, confusing or anything. I don't want to speak to his process or try to understand it. But that, I think you put it exceptionally well. He trusts his audience to come with him. And I think that, there's some joy, I think, in Damon's work of like not always knowing what's going on. Like that is, I think, also a benefit of having things done episodically week after week as opposed to all at once in a show like Watchmen, because you have an opportunity to sit with your friends, to listen to a podcast, to read articles online, and have people speculate and have people talk and have people come up with fan theories. And that stuff is fantastic. Like I think that doesn't just build build this sort of fan base, but I think it helps people with their fandom. I think it helps you kind of rationalize things. And sometimes, I mean, certainly this was the case for Game of Thrones and also for Watchmen. The fan theories are extraordinarily entertaining. It is amazing, how smart people are about this and how much they know the universe that they're a fan of, and that they take possession over it. And it really becomes something that is, when it becomes that sort of culturally significant, that it really becomes something that they kind of possess and buy in on, and that's fabulous. So yeah, I mean, to Damon's credit, he is extremely good at that, right? I mean, in all of his work, he is very good at knowing, sort of, well, this is something where if we don't completely understand it, it will do detrimental harm to the story. And this is one of those things where when it eventually pays off, it's sort of that little brain itch that, people really like, oh, that's why the squid rain happened. Like, oh, it's just sort of like, it's such a satisfying thing when those little things that aren't ever explained kind of pay off as like a side note. Those are great. And I think that Damon is one of the very best in the game doing that. So
I was watching a YouTube that was on the Watchmen, and it was titled Watchmen Explained. And then the very first sentence, he says, I'm going to explain to you one of the most confusing and yet exciting television series that I've ever encountered. And, normally you don't want something you've done to be classified as confusing, but I can see what you're saying, because then you get these little reveals. But I remember when I first sat down and watched it, and excuse me, my son is a big fan of everything comic and stuff. So he does all the research. And I'm watching the squid, and I'm like, what the? Like, what? How is this even, like, who writes this kind of stuff? And then you get to the reveal, and you're like, wow, this makes total sense. And the scope of it is, when you start to embed this little weird thing into something as if 3 million people die and the planet is saved from nuclear holocaust, is it worth it? So then you're like, well, let the squid rain then, kind of feeling. Where are we going? Over here? Right there.
As far as, like, you said fan theories, so, like, for the HBO universe, will they be adding comic book characters, and will they be adding, like, the Green Lantern, for example? Or?
Yeah, I mean, we don't talk about anything that's in development currently, but yeah, I mean, I think comic book properties are incredibly fertile. I think game properties are incredibly fertile, and I think not just HBO, I think the entertainment industry in general is going to start running a little bit thin on comic book characters, and that may not even be 10 years from now, because there's a lot of comic book characters, and there's a lot of great independent comic book press and stuff that still hasn't really been mined. But I think that I would personally, not on behalf of HBO, but just as a person who likes things, would love to see more game properties turned into really good, television or movies, because there are some good game movies, and I can't really think of any great game television shows, but The Witcher, yeah. Yeah, it's a book series. It doesn't count. No. The Witcher's very good. The Witcher's very good. It's very. I'm kidding. The Witcher's, of course, very good. But yeah, I mean that. To see more, game content and comic book content come into, and not just be, oh, it's a genre comic book thing, so it has to be like this. And I think that's where. People get weary about stuff like comic books and games, but where I think, at least with a couple shows that we've done, I think there's proof positive that you can have a very compelling narrative drama that just happens to be in the genre of comic book, fantasy, what have you, and that it can still be just as high drama as anything else, as a period piece, or as something like The Sopranos or something like that. But that genre is okay. Genre is great. People love it, and you can make really high quality, compelling genre, very easily. So, or not easily, but you can do it.
And then my follow-up question was, I noticed in DC's the CW series, they had the Crisis of Infinite Earths, and there was a sign that said Watchmen. I don't know if that was intertwining the CW.
I have no idea. Yeah, the Berlantiverse is a thing that exists separate from us, certainly. So I don't know, but wasn't that great? Like
Yeah, that was
the
amazing.
CW, man, like it was really cool that they did that. They brought back all those different Supermans, and like they did a great. I have to say, from the Berlantiverse being this like little thing that started with Green Arrow to this mega. I mean, it supports the Vancouver film industry like single-handedly. But like to being this sort of epic thing, and the stories that they're telling, again, it isn't the sort of very heavy DC cinematic universe stuff that has like a real hard texture to it. It is just fun, episodic television, you know, and that a lot of comic books, you know, is that. Not every comic book is, you know, an incredibly epic, dark tale of, you know, Batman and the Council of the Owls or something. It can be just sort of like fun, crossover-y comic book stuff, and it's just pure, you know, capes kind of stuff, and it's really satisfying. It's really good, and the actors that they have playing the heroes are all wonderful, and like, I love Superwoman. That's an absolutely fantastic character, fantastic show. You know, I think like they're just doing really fun stuff, and it's so satisfying to see, you know, like your obscure DC universe character like realized on this television show in like a very neat way. And so I think the stuff they're doing, you know, is fantastic. That stuff is all really fun. I certainly don't know if we're doing. I don't know at all. But no, I love their stuff. I think they're doing some super cool stuff over there.
All right, we have time for one more question. I think it's right over here. There we go.
All right, what's up, Steven?
Hey.
What's up? So I'm gonna sit down. So like, I know that you were integral into the transition between like before digital like film into the transition into like starting to do files and everything.
It's good research. Well
yeah,
done.
no, my
good research.
Bro, cause like when I told my dad I was coming to film school, he did not like it. So
Me too.
You know, so like, you know, but the one thing that he really loves about all of this is HBO. Like he grew up on it, you know, like he put me on it. Like he's a huge boxing fan. So like watching HBO like kind of change to what it is over the years, and like y'all are crafting like he said, like some of my favorite shows, like even Big Little Lies, a show that I didn't think I was gonna like. But it's incredible.
Oh, it's great. I mean, Trauma Valet and that whole team that does those shows, I mean, they are absolutely an amazing, they're a force of nature, that gang. And Greg Feinberg, their producer, produced True Blood and a number of things for HBO. Is a fantastic producer. But yeah, no, those you wouldn't expect. I mean, it's a, you know, it's sort of a, you know, this sort of story you wouldn't think that would appeal to a wide audience, but they have just made it impossible to not love. Like a series, it's so good. So yeah, no, it's funny because, you know, I think the great thing about your story is, like my father, we're both here, right? So obviously they didn't stand in the way of us doing this. Didn't think maybe this was the greatest idea. You know, my father is, you know, in commercial real estate. Very different from the movie industry.
Same.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah,
there you go, right? So, you know, so it's hard to rationalize how this could ever be a business, right? A business where you're going to make money, you're going to do well, you're going to provide for your family, all the things that, you know, my daughter, I hope, can do the same thing. And we're anxious when, you know, like, oh, you want to be a what? Oh, God. You know, and, you know, but to his credit, you know, you being here is a testament to the fact that he believes in you, believes in the fact that the thing that you want to do is something you're passionate about, and when you're passionate about something, you can be successful. And I'll tell you, when you let your dad hold your Emmy, he won't feel bad about letting you go to film school anymore. So, you know, that's a good. Leslie always says, you know, once I bought my mom a house, she wasn't worried about me being a mixer anymore. So I think it's like, you know, hopefully, and I'm sure you will, because you're a very ambitious individual. You have the opportunity to sort of pay your parents back for believing in you enough to let you come to a place like this, which is not a traditional sort of place, which is weird. Which when they come on that behind the scenes tour and we're looking at all the blinking lights and the amazing gear and going like, how can I not go here? This is amazing. They're just looking at like, where are your English lit classes? Like, what is the, like, how do we do, like, where are your, you know, and yet they believe in all of us enough to allow us to be here, to allow us to, and be it your parents, be it whatever support structure you have, because I don't think you come to a place like this without a support structure, and those of you that do are incredibly incredible individuals as well. But we feed on those individuals that let us be here, and the best thing that we can do, is work as hard as possible to to pay that kindness back. Because they didn't have to let you come here. This is a crazy thing. This is a crazy place. You meet Gary Jones, you're like, what the heck is going on here? And then you realize that, like, Gary is the perfect symbol of this place. He is the most genuine, the most amazing, the most caring person you'll ever meet in your entire life. And that DNA is so infused into this place that anything that you put into this school, into your career here, will get paid back 100 times over. And so, I get to talk to you guys all the time, which is a big, benefit to me, because I kind of get filled up with this ambitious energy of, like, you're like the stem cells of your representative careers, because you're not anything yet, but you have the sense of wanting to be the very greatest of the thing that you want to be, and that energy is amazing. I know why Rick and everyone is here and working with you guys to make you that, because it's intoxicating. It's fantastic. And I think that, to sort of summarize the whole thing, it is very difficult, and anything that you do will be. Certainly making a show like Watchmen is extraordinarily difficult, but when you have a group of people that are working at the very top of their game, they're doing the very best work that they can do, you're able to produce things like this, and you start to sort of cultivate those relationships here. I still work with people that I met at Full Sail. So when you really invest in yourself, in your career, in your school, in your academic career, in your group of friends, and your group of colleagues, and in your work, you will find that it does pay you back. It's not going to pay you back tomorrow, but it will eventually pay you back, and maybe you get to buy your mom a house.
All right, let's one more time for Stephen Beres. All right, Senior Vice President of HBO, and thank you guys very much. Thanks for joining us.